They told her their God was older than light, older than God himself. She ran from it, thinking she could escape. But what do you do when the thing your family worships never stops following you? Tonight, you'll hear the story of a woman who fled her family's secret religion, only to learn that their God wasn't confined to the shadows of her childhood. It was waiting for her. Welcome back, my friends of the dark. If you're already subscribed, you know what waits for you here. Stories that creep under your skin and stay with you long after the lights go out. And if you're new, welcome to the channel. You've stumbled into a place where nightmares are whispered aloud. Make yourself comfortable, but don't get too comfortable, because the story you're about to hear isn't just fiction. It's a reminder that some gods are not meant to be named. Stay with me, because this one will linger.
She was 8 years old the first time she heard his name. Not spoken, not even whispered, but pressed into her skull like fingers of smoke. Her family never said it aloud. They never dared. Instead, they mouthed prayers in silence, eyes darting toward the corners of the room as if something waited there, listening. They told her he was older than God, older than light itself, that his hunger kept the world turning, that only their devotion kept the sky from splitting open. Each night, she was forced to kneel before an altar, just a slab of stone streaked with something dark, and listen as her mother's trembling lips shaped a prayer too dangerous for sound. When she turned 17, she ran. She swore she would never kneel again, never bleed for him. But she was wrong, because wherever she went, he followed, watching, waiting, hungry. And tonight, for the first time since she fled, she could hear his name again, rising from the shadows of her bedroom, like a prayer she never meant to remember.
Years had passed since she last saw her family. In that time, she had built a fragile shell of normalcy. Her apartment was small, but hers, tucked away in a quiet street 2 towns over. She worked at a modest bookstore where the loudest sound was the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. She paid her rent on time, kept her head down, and spoke to no one more than she needed to. It wasn't freedom, not entirely, but it was distance, and distance was safety. At least, that's what she told herself. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning. She stood in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, when she saw it in the mirror, a figure behind her shoulder. Not a person exactly, more like a smudge, darker than the shadows it hid within. She spun around. The bathroom was empty. The toothbrush trembled in her hand, toothpaste foaming too bitterly in her mouth. She tried to laugh it off, to remind herself that shadows play tricks when one is tired. But later that day, while shelving books at work, she caught her reflection again in the shop's display glass. Her reflection moved a half-second slower than she did. On Thursday, she woke with her mouth dry, as though she had been whispering all night. Faint soreness clung to her lips. When she tried to remember her dreams, only fragments surfaced. Cold stone, flickering candles, her mother's trembling voice. By Friday, she stopped denying it. The bookstore had been unusually quiet. She was alone at the back, sliding a novel into place when the air changed. It grew still, heavy, as though the world itself had pressed pause. And then she heard it. Faint, fragile, but unmistakable. Her mother's voice. The same tone she remembered from childhood, breaking on the edges of a silent prayer. The book slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a crack that echoed far too loud in the silence. "Who's there?" she whispered, though the shop was empty. No one answered, only the ringing of her pulse in her ears. That night she dreamed of home, of the house she had run from. She stood in the ritual room, staring at the slab of stone streaked with dark stains. Her father was there, head bowed, hands trembling. Her little brother looked straight at her with wide, pleading eyes. She wanted to move, to reach him, but her body refused. She felt herself kneel, felt her lips shape words she could not control. When she woke, her chest was tight. Her tongue was coppery with the taste of blood. She hadn't bitten it.
The days blurred into one another, but the unease did not fade. If anything, it thickened. She began to notice details she had missed before. The landlord, usually gruff but polite, no longer looked her in the eyes when she passed him in the hallway. Instead, his gaze lingered just behind her shoulder, as though something stood there. A few days later, he muttered something under his breath when she handed him her rent. She couldn't catch the words, but the rhythm of his lips was horribly familiar. The same silent prayer. She tried to shake it off, told herself she was imagining things, that her past was bleeding into the present. But one evening, she came home to find her door unlocked. Nothing seemed disturbed inside, except for the candles. Small, white candles lined neatly along her kitchen counter. 12 of them, spaced evenly, their wicks unlit but smelling faintly of ash. Her stomach dropped. That was no coincidence. She swept them into a bag, carried them outside, and dumped them into the dumpster behind the building. Yet when she returned to her apartment, she froze. The candles were back, perfectly aligned, waiting for her. She locked herself in her bedroom that night and did not sleep. The dreams grew worse. In one, she was back in the ritual room. The slab was slick with something dark, and the air pulsed like a living heart. She saw her family kneeling, lips moving in silence, eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. She tried to scream, but no sound came. Then, the shadows moved. They rose from the corners of the room, stretching tall, bending forward. A figure took shape, impossibly thin, its head brushing the ceiling. She couldn't see its face, she never could, but she felt its hunger, a pressure so strong it hollowed her out from the inside. When she woke, her throat ached as though she had been praying all night. Her knees were bruised, though she couldn't remember leaving the bed. It was Saturday afternoon when she finally saw Mrs. Keller again, the kind woman across the hall who used to smile warmly each morning, but this time, there was no smile. Mrs. Keller stood in her doorway, lips moving silently, eyes glassy, as though fixed on something only she could see. In her hands, she held a bowl filled with water that rippled though she never touched it. "Are you all right?" the woman asked softly, though the voice was wrong, too flat, too rehearsed. "I'm fine," she said, gripping her keys tighter. Mrs. Keller's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile.
He's waiting. The words slipped out so calmly, as if she were commenting on the weather. Then she shut her door, leaving the hallway in suffocating silence. From that moment, nothing felt normal. At work, customers lingered too long, staring at her with vacant expressions. On the bus, strangers sat uncomfortably close, whispering words she couldn't hear. Even children seemed to pause and watch her as she passed, their little mouths moving silently, perfectly in sync. She stopped leaving her apartment unless absolutely necessary. The walls, thin as paper, offered no comfort. At night, she heard footsteps above her, slow and deliberate, though the floor above had been vacant for months. Once, she heard something drag across the ceiling, heavy and wet, leaving faint cracks in the plaster. She pushed her bed against the door, sat clutching a lamp like a weapon, and tried to stay awake. But exhaustion claimed her. This dream was different. She wasn't in the ritual room, she was in her own apartment. The air was heavy, the walls bending inward like lungs exhaling. Her family stood in the corners, their faces shadowed, lips moving silently. And then she saw him. The figure stepped from the shadows, tall and thin, arms too long, head bent as if the ceiling were too low for him. The air grew colder with each step. The lamp in her hands flickered weakly, like a candle about to die. She tried to move, to scream, but her body betrayed her. Her knees buckled, pressing into the floor, her lips parted, whispering words she didn't understand, syllables that felt carved into her bones. The god leaned closer. Though his face was nothing but shifting darkness, she knew he was smiling. She woke on the floor, lamp shattered, knees aching, her throat raw, her room stunk of ash. The next morning, she decided to run. She stuffed clothes into a bag, grabbed as much cash as she had, and bolted. On her way out, she glanced toward Mrs. Keller's apartment. The door stood ajar. Inside, she saw rows of candles burning low, casting warped shadows across the walls. On one wall, smeared in ash, was a single word, that the same forbidden name she had been once forced to whisper in silence. Her chest seized. She stumbled backward and fled down the stairs. The street outside offered no relief. People turned their heads in unison as she passed. Some smiled too wide, others mouthed words she couldn't hear. One man bowed his head as she brushed past, muttering something that made her blood run cold. "Welcome home." She ran.
She didn't stop running until the edge of town blurred around her. Her lungs burned, legs shaking, but the whispers followed, sliding along the back of her skull, curling into her ears like smoke. She staggered into a field just beyond the last row of houses, collapsing against the cold earth. The night pressed down, heavy, waiting. She told herself she would keep moving at dawn, that if she just stayed ahead of it, she could outrun him. She could outrun her family once. She could do it again. But when she woke, it was not to sunlight. It was to silence. The kind of silence that felt wrong, that hummed in her bones. The sky above was gray, the clouds swollen, unmoving. The air smelled faintly of ash, though nothing burned nearby. And then she realized she wasn't alone. Shapes stood at the edge of the field, dozens of them, unmoving, half hidden in the mist. Too far to see clearly, yet she knew their faces. Neighbors, strangers from the bus, the landlord, Mrs. Keller, all of them lined in a circle, their lips moving silently in unison. Her heart seized. She stumbled to her feet, clutching her bag as if it could shield her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're not real. You're not." The shape stepped closer. Their mouths opened wider. The whispers filled the air, louder now, the chorus that made the ground tremble. And then between them, something taller moved. The god stepped forward. It was him, just as in the dreams, tall, impossibly thin, his head bent beneath the low clouds. The shadows clung to him like a cloak, writhing with every movement. No face, no eyes, but the impression of a smile that chilled her marrow. The crowd sank to their knees in perfect silence. Her breath came ragged. She wanted to run, but her body refused. Her knees weakened as if pulled by invisible strings. She fought it, gritting her teeth, but the pressure grew until her legs buckled, forcing her down into the cold earth. Her lips trembled, words formed without her consent, ancient syllables she had buried years ago. The prayer spilled from her throat, voiceless but undeniable. "No, stop," she gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth, but her lips kept moving. The god leaned closer. The air thickened, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. She thought she heard her mother's voice again, guiding her through the prayer, trembling but steady. Then her father's, deep and resigned. Then her brother's, soft and frightened. They weren't here. They couldn't be here. But the voices wrapped around her, pulling her deeper into the ritual. The god's shadow stretched over her, guttering her completely. She fought harder. Her nails dug into the soil, tearing clumps of dirt as if she could anchor herself to the earth. She bit her tongue to stop the words, tasted blood, but still her lips moved. Tears blurred her vision. "Please," she choked, pressing her hands to her mouth, but her lips kept moving. The whispering stopped. For the first time since her childhood, the silence felt absolute. She dared to lift her eyes. The god bent low, so close she could feel the cold radiating from him. His head tilted. Shadows curled where a face should have been. And then, without a sound, he touched her. A single hand, long and skeletal, pressed against her chest. The cold sank deep past her ribs into her heart. Her vision dimmed. She felt herself unraveling, threads pulled loose one by one. Memories flooded, nights at the altar, the prayers, her family's bowed heads. Every moment of devotion she had ever given was torn free, feed in the hollow hunger in front of her. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted. She collapsed onto the ground, coughing, gasping for breath. The god straightened, withdrawing his hand. For a moment she thought he might vanish back into the shadows, that maybe somehow he had taken what he wanted and would leave her. But then she saw it. The crowd around her. Neighbors, strangers, faces she knew and didn't. Their eyes glowed faintly now, their lips parted in unison. And they all turned toward her. Not toward him, toward her. She realized the truth too late. He hadn't finished with her. He had marked her, claimed her, and now through her he would spread. She stumbled backwards, clutching her chest, her breath shallow. No, I won't." The voices rose, deafening now, filling the sky, shaking the earth. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the sound was inside her, vibrating through her bones. The god towered over her, smiling with a face she couldn't see, arms spreading as if to embrace the world. Her knees buckled again. She dropped to the ground, hands trembling. Her lips moved, no longer resisting, whispering the prayer that she had fled from all those years ago. This time it wasn't forced. This time it was hers. And as the god loomed over her, the last shred of her will snapped. She whispered the final syllable, the one she had sworn never to remember.
Some say faith gives us comfort, a light in the dark. But for her, it only opened the door to something that should have stayed hidden. She thought she could escape
her family's devotion. She thought distance would save her. But when a god is hungry, there is nowhere left to run. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who dares to listen. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and join us, because this is only one of many horrors waiting in the shadows. Until next time, keep your lights low and your prayers silent. You never know who might be listening.